Hey everyone, Mr. Macintosh here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to upgrade to macOS Sonoma in an easy walkthrough step-by-step way that anybody can follow. Let's jump in and get started. First off, before we get started, always check the update section of my description of this video just in case there's information that you might need to know about before you get started, because sometimes things change. And I also have a very detailed list of chapters in all my videos so you can get to exactly the point you need to go. Now, I wanted to go over a couple quick items here before we begin, because if you follow these steps, that'll save you a lot of time and issues later because you prepared properly before the upgrade. Because doing a macOS upgrade is a situation where you want to make sure you have all the things aligned before you make the jump. So the first thing we want to look at is your Mac compatible with macOS Sonoma? Because if it's not, you're not going to be able to do the upgrade or you're going to have problems. So here's the Sonoma list, and it shows you all the Macs here, and I'll put a link in the description if you want to take a closer look at this. The next thing is that if you have important applications, and make sure it's got a compatible version with macOS Sonoma. As time goes on, the new updates for the applications come out, but the last thing you want to do is make the jump to macOS Sonoma and have your app crash. The next thing we want to go over is make sure your Mac has enough free space before the Sonoma upgrade. Now we can check that multiple ways. You can go into About This Mac and click on Storage, but I like to actually go into Disk Utility, and you can have a clear view right here. It opens up right on Macintosh hard drive. You need a recommended at least 30 gigabytes of free space before you make the jump. Now we go to the most important part of the upgrade process. We need to make sure that you have a full backup before you make the jump to macOS Sonoma, because if anything goes wrong, you can always go back to the previous operating system. But as long as you have a backup, you can put all your files and folders and applications back on your Mac. Now, if you didn't do that and you jump to macOS Sonoma and then you do a Time Machine there, sometimes there's things that aren't compatible with the newer backup on older operating systems. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. Now, if you don't use Time Machine, still have a USB or an external hard drive and put all your important files in there. I recommend 2 sources of backups just in case one doesn't go right. The next part we're going to jump into is showing you how to make the upgrade to Sonoma, and then I'll go through the upgrading process, and then I'll go over some troubleshooting facts, like for example, if it doesn't show up in system preferences or you get an error, and then I'll talk about the downgrade process. And it's a very difficult process. That's why I recommend going all through these first. As long as you do, usually you won't have to downgrade later. Our demonstration Mac here today for the walkthrough is a 2021 M1 16-inch MacBook Pro. So the first thing we need to do, as we said, is make sure we do our backup, whether it's Time Machine or backing up files to a hard drive. We mentioned that earlier, but I want to make one last final mention of that before we get started. All we need to do is go into System Settings or System Preferences if you're on macOS Monterey or macOS Big Sur, and then go to Software Update. Software Update will show you all the updates available for your Mac. I usually like to make sure I'm on the latest version available of the operating system first, make sure all the fixes are there, and then that also makes the upgrade to macOS Sonoma smaller in size when we do that. Now, if you're installing a beta version, you have to make sure that you sign in with your Apple ID that is associated with the beta install. Then you'll see a little section up here, and you can click on beta, and then you can install the latest beta, and it'll show up right here. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention before we make the jump here is I mentioned backing up, but there's another thing that you could do to give you an extra lifeline just in case something goes wrong with the upgrade. And that's creating a bootable installer on a USB flash drive or an external hard drive. And let's say you're on Ventura. So all you would need to do is create a Ventura boot disk, and I have a video out for that. You can follow how to download, how to install the USB. And then if something goes wrong and whatever happens, you have that bootable installer that you can put Ventura, Big Sur, or Monterey back on the system and then restore your backup. The upgrade is really reliable. I've done it many times. Just in case something goes wrong, you're prepared and you are ready to go in case that happens. Okay, I'm all logged in with my fake Apple ID here for testing, and we have our macOS 14 Sonoma upgrade showing up here. Remember how I said it was anywhere between 3 and 5 gigabytes? There it is. Remember, the full installer is 12 gigabytes, and it's different if you haven't gone through this in the past, where you do not need to download the full installer anymore. It basically will install and upgrade your Mac to macOS Sonoma with a Delta type upgrade, and it goes a lot faster, and it takes a lot less size and space to be able to do it, which is really nice. Keep in mind, the icon will be different. If it's for example, macOS Sonoma Production, it'll have the little green, purple, and bluish type icon here. And if you're on beta, the icon might look different, but this is what you're looking for. So now that we know that, we're ready to upgrade. So all we need to do is click Upgrade Now. And we'll agree to the license. And then we need to enter in our account password for our Mac that we use to log into our Mac. And that's it. It'll start to immediately download the macOS Sonoma upgrade. It'll start down here, but it'll eventually give you an estimate on how long it will take to download, again, depending on your internet connection. So we'll give it a second here to give us an estimate. Okay, there we go. So you can see there's a little bit of exercise. Sometimes it upgrades the recovery operating system for macOS recovery, so it needs a little bit more size, and that's why it might be a little bit bigger in here than it was originally. So we're going to let this download and we'll come back right before it's done. Okay, we've got about 8 seconds of the download left, and then we're going to go to the next section. Okay, the download is complete. Now what it's going to do is it's going to switch into a preparing mode. Now this is just like your iPhone or your iPad. The operating system needs to prepare the upgrade, and then once that's done, it can reboot to apply it. Now it's going to give you an estimate. Here we go, preparing macOS 14 or macOS Sonoma. So we'll see how fast this thing actually goes. We see it's about 11:10 p.m. when it started preparing here, and we'll see how long it actually takes before it starts to reboot. Okay, that finished. It took about 10 minutes to go through the preparing phase, and now we have our message here that we're going to restart in 6 seconds, and we're going to switch over to our capture card so we can see what happens. There it goes, it's going to restart. So you're going to see this part first. It's going to go to the Apple logo, and then it's going to go through the progress bar for a little bit, and then it's going to reboot. Okay, we just had our first reboot, and as you can see, it's booting back up here, and it's going to continue the installation. Okay, now we're on our second reboot. Now it's at the part where it's actually upgrading your system volume to macOS Sonoma. In this estimate, we've got 11 minutes remaining on the upgrade. We'll come back as soon as we get back to the login window. And we are upgraded to macOS Sonoma, and it took just under 30 minutes to do. So we can log right back in, and you can see the new login screen here. So we'll type in our password to get back to the operating system, and then you can go through the analytics, iCloud analytics if you want to or not. I fully recommend doing file vault disk encryption, and the reason why I do is if anybody gets a hold of your Mac, if you don't have a firmware password on, they can get to your data in macOS recovery. So make sure that you have file vault full disk encryption enabled to keep your data secure. And we're back into the operating system. As you can see, our files are here on the desktop, our dock is here, and we have a full successful upgrade. Now, after the upgrade is complete, the system might be a little bit slower. You might hear some fans right after the upgrade because there's a lot of things going in the background. So there's some cleanups going on. There's also some Spotlight indexing that's happening in the background that, again, could last anywhere between 5 minutes and maybe even 20 or a half hour on the older Macs. Give it a little time to stabilize, and once it's stabilized, the system should be up and running a lot better at that point. Now, if you upgraded to macOS Sonoma and there's some problems, like let's say the system is running bad, slow, crashing, or whatever, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, you could wait for another update to come out. If you're on final or a beta update, if you're testing out the beta, you can give it a shot. Maybe Apple knew that there was a problem and fixes it, and everything's fine after the next. But let's say this continually crashes and there's nothing you can do, and you don't have the time to wait another week or 2 weeks before the next update comes out. Well, you might have to end up downgrading, and that's a difficult process because Apple does not make it easy to downgrade. But that's why we grab that USB full installer before have a backup plan to be able to do that. Now, you can do it through macOS recovery, but again, sometimes Apple does not even offer that. And that's why I'm going to make a whole video on how to downgrade the system if you run into this where you can do nothing other than to downgrade. That's where I also said that you need to make sure you have that time machine. But let's say you upgraded and you don't have a time machine and you didn't make a backup before you upgraded. That's okay, because we can still make a backup now even if we're having problems. You can run a time machine, and you can run a USB flash drive or hard drive, copy all the files and your documents, all your photos, all that stuff to your backup drive, and then restore them back once you're to a previous operating system. So that's at least a plan that you can do if there's problems after the upgrade to macOS Sonoma. But I hope the upgrade went well for you, and if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.